All right. So as you see on my right, there are two people, two artists. I'll let them introduce themselves. Please share your name, where you're based, any collectives you represent, and a brief of what techno means to you.
Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Fayaz Ramtola, otherwise known as MAWE. I have been in the techno scene for about 15 years now. I um, I have did my Bachelor of Arts in Audio Production, Sound Engineering in Barcelona, which is where I really fell in love with techno the most. Also did my master's in psychoacoustics and honed that into techno. I am a resident for Temple, as Maria mentioned, and also I own a record label in Barcelona called Safar, and I'm part of another record label in Berlin called Nala. And I am a technoholic, absolutely. and yeah, it's great to be here. Great to be able to discuss what I truly love in sound, which is techno.
Hey folks, I am Eric Kamau, otherwise known as Eric A. Uh, I have been a DJ for this is my 11th year now, and techno for me is origins. I remember very well when I started DJing that the one platform that felt like home for me was Tempo, and I'm very glad that I got to share my sound there and also to grow in the space as well. Uh, I've DJed with MAWE for quite a bit of events, and yeah, so it's origin for me. Right now, I am part of a collective called Sunset Groove, um, which is offering a different type of electronic music. We specialize in the deeper shades of house, but I can never forget my roots and where it started for me. Um, Thank you, Munre, for the platform, and I'm happy to be here to have a chat with you folks and also to share.
Nice, thank you. And shout out to Calotropis Radio, where this has been streamed. Um, do share with more people for like Thursdays, Fridays. There's always something. Cool. So today we're talking about the subgenres in techno. Are there specifically though what you can also experience while in the scene? Are there any subgenres you know from the audience? Afrotech. Okay, so we need to achieve, given the helping people understand the difference of the sounds. We appreciate that, though let's say no, but yes. Hopefully by the end you're able to distinguish. Yes? What and industrial? Industrial techno? Yes? Okay, okay. That's something we'll get into. That categorization of things. Any other? Okay. So from research, or rather ChatGPT, it gave a whole list. So there's Detroit, techno, minimal, acid, industrial, dub, hard, melodic, tech, ambient, deep, tribal, breakbeat, psychedelic, progressive, funky, hypnotic, technotrance, ghetto tech, dark, lo-fi, electro, shrans, experimental, and gabba. That's a whole list of like 20. But however, as you're taking time to understand, there are various ways you could approach distinguishing which kind of techno you may be listening to. So it could be by the sound design or production style. It could be through the history or the origins, or by the time of night where you're walking into a club, you can be able to categorize as well. And also by how music streaming platforms categorize that. So that's where you'd find the raw, deep, and hypnotic categorization. So there's also like big beat parts. There's peak time and driving, raw, deep, and hypnotic. So they're different ways. But today we want to talk about the genre itself. We'll start with Detroit techno. Um, do you know of the origins when it comes to Detroit techno, or the characteristics that brought it out?
Yeah, so from my understanding of techno, so first of all we have to go back to house, and house was started in Chicago, and when that music was being played, it also was created by a handful of people, some iconic people such as Frankie Knuckles that people will know about, and basically it was at a time when basically there was a depression. A lot of people lost their jobs. People didn't really have a lot of money left over to be able to do their music, and so people started going to the studio, and there are all these different musicians. There's like people that play a piano, people that play the guitar, all these random musicians, and they all shared the studio space to record their instruments in different keys, right? And then they all got a copy of each other's vinyls, right? And then you have these guys with these vinyls now, and they don't have a drummer, but then you got the drum machine that comes in, and so guys are there spinning these records with different instruments and different vocals, very soulful stuff, and with this drum machine. And the thing is, they didn't have money for venues, right? So where do they do it? They do it at their houses, and house music, right? So while this is going on, this is such a powerful movement, and people come through from around and listen to this, but they don't have access to those vinyls and stuff. But what they can do is they can sample, and so taking samples of that and going to Detroit is where now people took samples of house and used samples with the drum machine, which made it a lot faster, a lot more hypnotic, a lot more driving. You would say monotonous, but in a very, very hypnotic way. And so for me, that's my understanding as to how techno actually started. And from there, people heard it and they took it to Berlin. And it became a really powerful thing there, because once the Berlin Wall comes down, there was this one music that was used to separate to connect both sides. And they were celebrating using this one sound, which was techno. And that's my understanding as to, yes, how it originally formed.
Yeah, Fayaz has broken it down really succinctly, actually. Yeah. So, for me, when it comes to Detroit techno, three names come to mind. So, I'd say maybe pioneers, or like forward-thinking selectors of their time. So we have Juan Atkins, we have Derek May, we have Kevin Saunderson. You folks might know Kevin Saunderson from, like your parents' records. Who knows Good Life? So yeah, these folks basically pioneered the sound. So in the mid 80s, this sound came about, and it's like Fayaz said, the roots were actually in house, in Chicago house, but then they took it a step further and fused it with like soulful samples. There's also some bit of religious samples in there, and they just made it funky. They made it funky, and again, like Fayaz pointed out, like with the collapse of the Berlin Wall, this sound really got adopted in Europe, and then that's when we see the rise of the clubs like Trezor and Osgood, and this provided a platform for these folks to showcase this sound and like just spread it to the world. Yeah, and am I missing out on something here? So with that, Detroit techno became a sound that you could easily recognize from a record just from the samples. So it's very fast, it's very stripped back, and then the samples of just that make it funky, with whether it's drawn from religion or just from the African American roots. And with that, this sound grew into what we know now as the genre. Yep, that's my understanding of Detroit techno.
Lovely. Something that came up also from the previous discussion is that at that period, Detroit was facing like a social economic like lapse, and artists got the opportunity to have access to machines that they couldn't before. Like things became cheaper, and this now adding technology, I guess, to the samples and whatever they were doing before brought this techno-y vibe, which in their minds was like sounds of the future, like technology, like yeah, maybe yeah. Yep. Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Is there anything more to add there? We talked about the influential artists, like you mentioned uh, Atkins. There's Derek May, part of Belleville 3 with Kevin Saunderson. Um, there's a Cybertron, but then that's Juan Atkins as well. Yeah. Are there any others?
Down the line, then there's obviously there's Jeff Mills, who I think is someone that should definitely be mentioned in that sense. Someone that really was a master of the drum machine, and could do so much with just that. Like the people that even created the drum machine didn't realize you could do the things that Jeff Mills could do it. So Jeff Mills is someone that I would say could be added onto that list, definitely.
All right. How do you feel about Detroit? Is that okay? I know sound-wise, we'll get there. We'll play some tunes to help give some understanding. But I wanna move to minimal techno, and a backstory. When I met Eric, I heard his sound, his track, and it was a minimal techno track, and that's my perspective of you is through minimal. So maybe share the story of minimal techno.
Yeah, wow, you really brought back a fond memory for me. This is around 2016 when I had started experimenting with DJing and also got to learn from some people in the scene. Shout out Ele Dave for teaching me how to mix. Uh, then, yeah, I had always had the vision that I was always going to be a producer before I become a DJ. And that's how I would have loved to be known. And my first interpretation of techno in music was a track called Fi. It was available on my Bandcamp, and actually that's how Monre and I got to connect over this type of music. And yes, you could classify it as minimal techno. And what is minimal techno? So I would say it's a very stripped back version of the genre itself. What do I mean by stripped back? So you listen to a song and there's all these elements harmonizing to make you have that experience. So you take away most of these elements and you are left with fundamentally just the drums and maybe some textures that are like made through a synthesizer, and there you have it. And it's very repetitive, as Jeff Mills once said in an interview, that you go to a place and someone who hasn't experienced the sound within 3 minutes will lose their mind. They'll be wondering what's happening, what's the progression from here. But what we understand from minimal techno is that there are so many textures that are underneath, and this is where producers stand out. You can do so much. You can make variations of the sound using like vinyl noises, for example. You can sample atmospheres that are around you, and then these are just layered within the track, and then you can use your production skills of using maybe LFOs, different types of filters to create a story from that. An iconic album that pioneered this subgenre of techno is one called Minimal Nation by Robert Hood. You may know him as Flowplan as well. And this made him stand out, and this made him begin a conversation really within the scene. And it was very stripped back. It's mostly you listen to it and you notice instantly the drums that come from it. And then again, as far as mentioned, these were the drum machines that came from Roland, and there's the 909s and the 808s, which have distinct sound, and these were used by these producers back then. So Minimal Nation came out in 1994. That's the year I was also born. So with Minimal Nation out on Axis Records, the record label owned by the legendary Jeff Mills, this began a different type of sound in the clubs. And then it was brought forward by the folks like Plastic Man, Richie Horton, and then other DJs that you know right now as Ben Clark, Marcel Detman, thinking of many more. You have Asha Perkins, yeah. So this stripped back sound works very well in the club as well. I tend to play it a lot, like within the second hour of my sets after we've done like an ambient build up, and it's really energetic as you fuse more tracks in your mix. And a good example is how Jeff Mills mixes. You have him playing like 4 tracks at once. These are all different elements of minimal techno, but the result is very beautiful in how it all sounds together. And yeah, for me, that is minimal techno. Maybe I'll just add, like, if you want to find out more about the sound, as you're digging through your label catalogs, the sound coming out of Minus Records, Axis Records, Osguton, the label, this will really define the sound for you. Wow.
Yeah, no, everything he said is, hitting it on the nail. And just one thing also I wanted that I've noticed with minimal as well is it is also encapsulating very short sustained plucks. Very short sustained plucks is like how minimal also like kind of brought it up. And what took a turn in which minimal could also be melodic was Boris Brejcha. And so you could also have minimal that can actually be melodic, but the thing is he was using very minimalistic sounds, even to the sense of the synths were not long sustained or long dragging, just plucks here and there, high pitch normally, and that could kind of give you your whole melodic basing. And yeah, that's something also I really appreciated about minimal.
And actually, for the producers in the space, if you're looking for inspiration for this kind of sound, just think about it as less is more. So use less elements, but find a different way to layer them or arrange them, and then this will give you the sound itself. So you don't have to work with a lot of sounds in your track. You can use very few elements, but then you fuse them in an interesting way for 6 minutes or 7 minutes or however long you'd like your track to be.
I have a question. So in Nairobi, would you hear minimal being played like at 12 a.m. or like 2 a.m. or it would be like a warmer kind of set or towards the end, towards the closing?
Well, first thing to need to recognize about techno parties is that they start really late. Yeah. So the bash starts at probably 11 p.m. or midnight, and this is the kind of sound that it really works for a lot of these scenarios. I would say maybe it's good for starting the party and also for like closing it down. And then if you can also look at how it's fused with house, because a producer like Ricardo Villalobos, legend in the scene. So he's known as a pioneer in minimal techno, but also the way he fuses the sound with the minimal house, like the house coming out of Romania and that side of Eastern Europe, it seamlessly goes into minimal techno, and that sound goes off in whether you're at a house music party that is peaking up, or you're just starting the night in a exclusive underground techno event. Yeah.
Right. So that's something we've learned, at least here, or like you'd find it in the beginning most of the times. Most, yeah. Because I think there are sets that you could find like a full minimal, like 8 hour like vibe, because it's a minimal vibe or just like a chill daytime kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Nice. So, which track would you like us to play first? Robert Hood. It's on this side. Let me help you. Okay. Okay. Can minimize. So, do you want to speak to the track?
So while while that song was playing, I think I was trying to count the elements that I could hear in the song, and I could hear maybe just the kick drum, the hats that come in and go, which is a creative, subtractive way of producing your tracks, where you have the elements where you bring them in and out of your track, and then you could hear that kind of sound, the hats, the thing that makes you go uns uns uns. That specific hat is from a Roland 909 drum machine, and it's a very distinct hat that adds to the groove of your track. The bass itself, you could tell it's an acid type of bass, and that comes also from another Roland machine called the Roland 303, TB303, yeah. And ideally, that's it. So, as a producer, this is inspiring for me when you have like your writer's block where you feel like you need to add more to your music, but you just have to find a creative pattern, and then make that mesh with the groove of your drums, and then bring it in and out. One tip for me as a producer is that record quickly or write very quickly, because you tend to get stuck in your head thinking of ways to make it more creative. And you always have to remember that all of the music that you hear, all of the art that you see is just unfinished material, something that the artist gave up on trying to perfect. So what comes out is, you don't know how it's going to be perceived by the world, but like just put it out there and don't get stuck with whatever idea you come up with. That's a piece of inspiration we can get from this type of sound. So that sound was from 1994, by the way. So this next one is something more modern, to maybe give you a perspective of how the sound evolved throughout the years.
Newton. And definitely adding that to my playlist. Something I've realized, like, I started producing or like focusing on minimal production this year, and when my like foot just starts doing this, I know I've gotten the groove. It's coming, and I've noticed people just like tapping their feet, and then when the like melodic like the ambience comes in, I've seen you doing this, like. So yeah, do you wanna
Yeah, so as we've heard, technology is great, right? So this track is from 2015, and you can see now what the possibilities become when you have more advancement in software, right? So this track has definitely more how do you call them, environmental, but more textures in terms of the hypnotic kind of part that goes in and out, and you can tell like this is now what you can achieve when you have now software. You just come up with a sound and then play with various audio effects like filters and LFOs, and then you bring that in and out, and you see the result is that groove. I fundamentally, the drums are still the same as the one from 1994. And I'm speaking to the kick drum and the hats and the claps as well. And then there's just a groovy kind of synthesizer sound that is just added there to make you feel like this is danceable. This is a kind of track that I would like to play when things are picking up, like when the audience is starting to show up and people are trying to stream into the dance floor, and it meshes well into the other kinds of songs that you want to play into the night. Yeah, so that's for me is a story in the evolution of minimal techno.
Nice, thank you for sharing. And I attest to what you said when it comes to production. Like, don't stay too long with it, because I have a track like from March, which is still like it was complete. I even like tested it out when I played at Encode, and like it felt so nice, and I've gotten good feedback. But then when I got back to it, I was like, oh, let me add this. And when I added, then like some weeks later, I'm like, oh man, I think I messed it up. So, so I get that. And yes, less is more. Yes, yes, yes. So, um, so I'm going back to V3 version 3. I mean version 2, version 3. Maybe we'll see. I can share with you guys. Let me know. Cool. So let's go on to the next genre. We have hard techno, hard and groove. All right. Story, you got the gist.
Yeah, so I love all forms of techno, but what has really resonated with me is groove techno. And groove techno is a combination of a few subgenres of techno. It incorporates hard techno using hard percussions, hard layering on kicks and on the percussions, but as well as multiple layering on each individual instrument for synthesis. And these the synthesis themselves, the sounds themselves came from electro, and combining those with hard techno created this groove techno. And I would say the person that pioneered this sound, that created this sound, is Oliver Huntman. And this sound just became something that resonated so much with me, because it's something that can just completely destroy a dance floor. But at the same time, it's like you almost feel it's like a guilty pleasure. You almost feel bad for just having that Scrooge face on when you're listening to that bass. And it's all about that bass, that groove, that that techno, but with interesting synthesis that's less is more, but more is more. If that makes any sense, in the sense where you could have a few elements, but each of those elements are layers and layers and layers. So just that one bass line has gone through like 12 layers, you know. and then you have all these backing sounds as well. And now in the modernization of what groove techno is, there's also psychedelic elements added onto that as well. So pieces from psychedelic techno are also involved in that, which is now what gives it kind of that atmosphere in the background on top of this heavy sounds. And yeah, that's what that is right now. Yeah, so on there's a couple that I put there. I think there's one Oliver Hunterman Victor Ruiz remix. Magnet. So Magnet was an original track that came from Oliver Hunterman, which was actually one of the first proper groove techno tracks that I heard. And what was interesting about that track was that Oliver Hunterman insisted on not using computers. So he was using nothing but analog synthesis and recording on tape. Now what this allows you to do is to have this kind of slight offbeat and back. So you have like elements that kind of move away and come back because they're not limited to a computer. And having said that, I also have to say why you choose analog, and why did you choose analog over using a computer? Because it's a very simple. This is my simple definition of that, is that when you have an analog sound, it is directly created by the synthesizer or by tubes or anything. There is no computer that you will find in the world that knows how to make a perfect circle, right? So you can look at a waveform, and the more you zoom in, you're going to see pixels, right? You're going to see it. It's no doubt. That's why the warmth and the sound of analog is untouched. Now the thing is, as soon as you convert that from analog to digital, it goes into digital, right? So he had this theory where he just wanted to keep that raw sound of analog. So it took him thousands of takes, because you can imagine, you mess up on tape, that's it, man. There's no edit. You go back, you re-record. So that's how he started this. Now he started his own record label called Sensor Sounds, dedicated to the sound. And someone else that really appreciated the sound, someone that I actually know, his name is Victor Ruiz. And he then was kind of shadowed with Oliver Hunterman, and he then took it to another level. So Oliver Hunterman, this track Magnet, he never allowed anyone to touch it, apart from Victor Ruiz. So now this is the remix of Victor Ruiz. So this is him taking that old track and modernizing it. You can see during this break over here how the pitch is going down and everything. But what was actually happening is literally just slowing down the tape and then re-recording it on another tape. Yeah. Um so like I said, so this is basically what Groove. This is now I think 2014 around there. And it's where Groove Techno came. So like I said, this was someone that was shadowed by Oliver Huntman. And what I really love about Groove Techno, as you've heard on that, is the layering. Like for example, that bass on its own is not just a bass. It's multiple basses, using saturation, using EQing, using subtractive synthesis, just to create this one bass line. And then those stabs that you hear, dun dun dun, like all of that is not just an individual sound. It's all layered. And then during the breaks is literally just about using the most simplest form that sounds so cool, is taking different elements and slowing them down, speeding them up, but having the rooted percussion beat behind it. And yeah, so groove techno is formed from that. What makes it groove is the fact that you're swaying, like it's going up and down, and it may be very very small, very subtle, but it's enough for you to feel, enough for you to move, and enough for you to groove. So it's not monotonous, it's just got this groove about it.
There's something you shared about the artist called the one using the analog, yeah. In the current, like the present time, would it be worth it for a producer to explore making music with analog, like hardware and all that? Yeah, like would it be recognizable? I know maybe for a normal ear, like they would, like someone who's not a producer maybe, would it be able to distinguish, but is it something worth to explore in terms of production, like the analog sense?
I think absolutely. But already, there are the place we've gotten to right now when it comes to VSTs, virtual synthesis and stuff is really amazing. It's really great. But like I said earlier, there really is no sound you're going to get like analog. As a producer, I personally think that there's this, you could do whatever you want on virtual and you can create the same sounds and everything, but you're going to spend a long time creating the perfect chain to just create something we call warmth, right? And from the get-go, your synthesizer is going to give you that warmth, fill up that space. Otherwise, it kind of sounds empty. So I think yes, it's definitely worth getting into synthesizers. Definitely worth exploring with some analog if you can afford it. It's an expensive hobby, but yeah, I definitely think it's worth it for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, Fayaz brings up a very interesting point on when it comes to now the purity of the sound. And my question for Fayaz then would be, so is it worth writing your tracks through a computer, right? And then pushing to have that released on a vinyl? Or is it that um, if you create a track like this, avoiding the computers, your only option is to release it via vinyl because you want to maintain the fidelity of the sound, right? So is it worth around the vinyl conversation and how pure that sound is it worth writing a track digitally and then trying to press it on vinyl?
So what would I'd say? So like I said, when Oliver Hunterman started doing this, we did not have the capabilities that we now do with softwares. For example, I work with Ableton, and I am an Ableton professional, and that's what I use. And where it's come now, I mean, even Logic, all of them have come far. Where now I think you're able to, for example, create a track on digital. But what you can do is you basically send those MIDI notes, yeah, once you've created the track, send those MIDI notes out towards a synthesizer. And then we record that synthesizer. So I think you don't necessarily now have to do what Oliver Hunterman did. But I think now what you can do is you can create the track digitally, but then now don't like the preset or the sound that you're using, you send just the MIDI notes into a synthesizer. Let that come back in as the actual sound of a synthesizer. That's what I think would be now. In terms of pressing on vinyl, yes, I do believe that there is a particular sound that you get out of vinyl, which is, you get this crackle, you get this warmth. But I also think that now, if it's well produced and if it's well mastered and you're running all of that through analog gear as well, then I think, it sounds really good. As long as it's not an MP3 and you're running on WAV or a FLAC, then I think it's pretty much, it's okay nowadays. I think it's all good to do that. But I would recommend for you to get that sound, create your track digitally. There's no problem with that. Send your MIDI into a synthesizer, record that back in, and then when you master, also try and send that through actual analog gear, because like analog compressions and analog mix index, you will hear a huge difference.
And in speaking of the hardware, it's unfortunate Jabba Jesus is not able to come today, but you'd have seen the setup. Like at least basic setup you need is the drum machine, the a sequencer, and synths, right? So the drum machine gives you the drums, and the synths give the like the bass. You could have the bass there, or the melodies, and our sequencers can help you build like rhythms and all that, right? Yeah, so but it's okay for the live production set. I'll just step in and do an improv thing on Ableton. However it sounds, we'll see. Great. Yeah, and you also mentioned that it's really fast to make music with hardware, with analog. Yeah.
So I think when you know your gear, it's the same as having any device you own or any car or anything. Once you get used to it, once you know your gear, you know your setup, then yes, it becomes not only easier, it becomes more organic, because you're not there cutting and pasting, right? Like you know your gear, you know what you're going for. So you end up going for example, when I use analog gear, I'll end up having my own jam session, and I just start jamming with analog gear for like, a couple of hours, and then I start to feel something, and then that's when I start recording. I get like a skeleton of the idea. I know how to do that. Then I go digital, and I refine everything with the MIDI and all, and then I record that. And I like to be able to do that. So another reason I love Ableton is because Ableton gives you that opportunity to be able to perform live, for yourself. With a lot of other softwares, they only had the arrangement view. With Ableton, you had the session view. And that's what it was made for. Ableton was actually created in the beginning for jazz, to be a session software for jazz. And so it allows you to play with whatever you have. You can have analog gear, you can have digital, you can have a hybrid, and I think you just start jamming, you get used to your sound, you get used to what devices you have, play around with them, and just have some fun with it. And then eventually you start to get into that groove. And With analog, I think it's also important not to go into the studio with a mindset of saying, I'm going to create this. It's about you going in there and creating what is created. Absolutely.
Nice. Thank you. I want us to go back real quick to Detroit Techno. There's one track I've queued in by a remix by Robert Hood. I think it's called City Lights or City Nights. And I find like listening to Detroit Techno back then and now, I feel like it's one of the sounds that has maintained a certain like vibe with it, or it's distinguishable. But you can help me deconstruct it. Yeah. What can you say about it?
So yeah, I've noticed a few things there. Great track. Love the groove and everything. So there's a few things there in terms of a production point of view that I noticed that I really like. So one thing that I'm sure all of you that have heard techno, you've heard that stab, that dun dun, right? And that's originally a dub techno stab. Like that's where I think that original stab comes from. It's a fifth, and it's something that is used in a lot of techno, and I love that sound. And it kind of just it's when you hear that track and you think techno, that's how you know. And what's really cool is so that was happening, and then you heard this synthesizer that was happening as well at the same time. But if you notice, they're both the same. They're both the same frequency. But like, how are you hearing both at the same time? So this is where it comes into play, where you need to understand how to use mid-side EQing, how you can position a particular track in the stereo field as well as the rest without them clashing with each other. So that's something that is very well done in this, because normally people just shy away from that. They have this one sound that's this one frequency, cool, I'm not going to put another sound that's that. But in this one, you hear an actual sustained synth and the stab. Same frequencies, but they're both heard. So that's really cool that he did that. Another thing I noticed, which is really cool, is you heard the percussion is right? And what's really also useful in creating a dynamic with techno is that you have to humanize that. So how you do that is that you create different velocities for each particular hit. Even if it's the same sample of that hat, it's humanized in terms of the velocities are different, the movement is different, and the group is different. So like it kind of gives it a sway and also gives it this a humanizing touch, which doesn't allow it to be boring. And yeah, that's what I noticed from that, which I really, really like.
Yeah, so Fires brings up a really important tip on how to add groove to your tracks, which is, by velocity means the pressure at which that supposing this track was being performed by a drummer, like a live band, the pressure at which he hits the cymbal varies, and that's a human thing because we're not perfect and we're not programmed to mathematically function in perfection. So this is something that you can recreate in your studio, and by varying the velocity at which you touch these drum elements gives a different element of groove. So it doesn't feel robotic. It doesn't feel arranged in a certain way. This is one of Robert Hood's maybe more melodic productions, because you can feel like the elements that he adds using the synthesizers. They add like different melodies. It's not something that's stripped back. That's just the drum sounds and then maybe some atmospheres in the background. For which, by the way, you can tell from the beginning of the track, like when the kick drum and the bass are harmonizing as the track starts, you can feel an atmosphere building in the background. Now that's a very interesting use of echoes, where you just you can have an overdrive with this, where you just set a particular sound to just grow in width, in how wide you can hear it in your ears. And that's the other thing that Fayaz mentioned that is super interesting. When you're making these sounds, think about the space that they occupy. And an interesting way to think about this is always think about your track as this electronic track that I've made. If it was to be performed by a band, where would everyone be positioned in the band? So you have, maybe just to touch briefly on this, you have the people playing the kick drums and the bass all the way at the back, because you don't want that sound to be very wide. And then you have people who are playing these melodic sounds, these wider sounds that you can hear. You space them out in rather wider apart. And that has an overall effect in how wide the sound is perceived in your head. Yeah, so a couple of takeaways from this track.
Thank you. So we're almost on time. There was a categorization of how you'd find the music in music platform, like you distinguished techno music. So in the many genres we listed earlier, so where would you put peak and drive-in and hard techno? Like what genres would you put under that?
So I think the whole peak driving is basically just a whole group of multiple genres. It's obviously because of Beatport that even exists. I think the definition of that, if you go and you search for peak and driving, you're basically just searching for peak time music. You're searching for what techno can I play at a peak time. And that's basically what I think that whole genre falls in. Because if you go inside there, you're going to find minimal, you're going to find groove techno, you're going to find hard techno, you're going to find, everything that could be played at a peak time. That's what I think. That it's just a generalization of all the music that you think you could play at a peak time.
Yeah, peak time is about energy, about what is more memorable to people, what makes them tick, and yeah, you can't put a finger on it as a group of producers say, this is the sound we're pushing. It's called peak or driving. So it's a I'd say it's a spectrum of different types of genres of techno, and I don't think there's a producer who goes into the studio thinking, okay, whatever I'm gonna make here is gonna be peak or driving. It's just an idea that they put into that they created, and then let the world like put a category to it. On the subject of digging, I feel like if you're really into discovering this type of sound, then a platform for you to go and check out is discogs.com. Uh, Ideally started as a catalog to help people find vinyl records, but it grew into something so huge and so a really wide database of different sounds. And I feel you will find more value looking for music there, which is also categorized by subgenres, some that I didn't even know existed. But you will find more value looking for tracks there, or related tracks to what you're looking for on Discogs rather than Beatport or Traxsource or them.
May also add something on digging. So to find your sound and to find that. So I found a formula that works, that makes it really interesting for me to dig. Is that when you hear a track that you like, that's your sound, that's your vibe, yeah. Pay attention to the artist and the label, yeah. Once you go into the artist, you look at all the other tracks the artist has done, and also all the other labels that the artist is associated with. When you go into those labels, you will now find other artists and other tracks that are similar to that. That's one way to start digging, if I was to give you guys any advice on searching. But yeah.
And to add on the platforms, you could use Juno downloads, DJ.de, that's another one, and Beatport as well. Did I mention Traxsource? Yeah. So, because I find you could dig in Spotify, but it's also hard to get what you really, really want. Yeah, so there's a
Techno as well. Don't shy away from SoundCloud and Bandcamp. Like I have found some gems over there, but like people literally have like 200 followers and like insane music. So never be searching for music based on how popular someone is. Like you can find some gems on SoundCloud, you can find some gems on Bandcamp. That's all.
So as we wrap up, what are some of the takeaways you can give? I feel like the talk was quite technical. So for someone who's just like in the scene, randomly comes to techno or the other experiences, what would help like distinguish what they're listening to, especially like with those I mentioned of Afrotech, or just distinguishing house and techno when you go into the scene or what the DJ is playing?
So like you had mentioned, the whole Bible of genres. There's so many different genres. But there is a way to just tell the difference between the basic heads of genre. So if you're looking at so if someone mentioned Afrotech, that's tech house. That would be more under a tech house genre. There is something called Afro techno as well. So the thing that differentiates them is when you see a lot of a groove and more of according to me, more kind of a lightening or uplifting kind of grooves and a lot of use of percussion. I think that kind of falls under tech house mostly. And when it gets darker, then you're in techno. And when you can hear that this is just, it's not really about like making you jump around all happy and all. Techno is something that is an acquired taste. Techno is also something that is deep. So I think the more you listen to the genre, the more you understand it. And then it gets to the point where when you hear techno, you know it's techno.
A takeaway for someone getting into this, just as someone who is interested in the music, first of all, I am jealous for you because you do have a lot to discover and it's going to affect you in various ways. I think, number one, sound system matters. So as you go to a party, as you get to discover the music, you will develop an ear for good sound. And I think this is always feedback that you can always give to the people organizing the party. Tell them like, hey, I think this experience was good for me because of how the sound was done, or how it was bad for me because the sound was not up to par for how I felt it. Ignore the hype, like what you like, and support the artist if you do end up going into looking for individual tracks. So if you find something quality that's on SoundCloud or Bandcamp, you can always this is the thing I like about Bandcamp. You can pay whatever you want for a lot of the tracks. So even if it's $1, pushes the artist. If it's on SoundCloud, like the stuff, repost it if you like it. And I think with the algorithms nowadays, so this will just expose you to more of that sound that you're looking for. Yep.
For me, I could say there's something someone told me that house is for the heart. You feel it within, like in your heart. Techno is for the mind. So like you'd experience it more like you're listening to the deepness of the sound and the complexity and the random things happening through just the uns. Like there's so much in between. So that's another way it could help. But yeah, we can open the floor to the audience. Do you have any questions? Yes?
Hey, hi guys. My name is James. I'm a percussionist player, and I appreciate the panel. That's a very great job. And I have some few things I really want to just to acknowledge from you guys about when it comes to, because you have tried to mention like the categories, but I come to realize that and when you are sampling there, you can't do away with the kick and the bass, because if you eliminate kick and the bass, it might be sound and you might not call it a techno. So to me that is a paramount one. But in a situation of I've played with many DJs live on stage, and just the way MAWE said, techno is deep. It's very deep. I find that most DJ comes to violate it in a way that they ignore that deepness, in a way that there is that kick, and maybe we have a set and I have my percussion set. How do I do to either eliminate, just consider that kick but not play it on my percussion, but play the other elements like rhythm, mixing on top of that kick? Because if most 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 percussionists who plays along with the DJs, I find that they get it very hard to eliminate the kick from their side. To is it not to assume or to consider the on floor kick from your set, and then maintain the other side of the rhythms, the mixing, the simple percussions, soft percussions, I mean, or like the on top elements to add up. But you find the problem is that if if I don't want to lose that script as a percussionist, I have to go along with, I have to create my own kick on the percussion so that I don't lose anything. Another thing, is it good that before a performance, should most of the DJs train with percussion rather than just calling a percussion from the push to come on the stage and then start playing with the DJ? Because in many occasions that is what I see, and I find that most percussionists, they flop. Or what is the problem normally come to occur? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. And so I've heard this a lot of times, especially here, a lot of percussionists will play with, with DJs and all. And to answer your question on what I think that should be done is that I go back to what I said before about stereo field. And I feel that if you understand the kick basically should be mono. Yeah, a kick should be mono, it should be centered. So now, you as a percussionist, if you wanted to get the best out of your performance, yeah, I would say not just directly getting a mic and plugging that into the decks. I would say using a software such as Able or using something to be able to create your own stereo field. So you know that your percussions, maybe multiple mics, are going to be on the left, on the right, and you're going to use an EQ to cut out the low frequency that the kick is using. So that now you can shine on that percussion and the kick is not going to be in the way.
Yeah, great point actually, and also important discussion to be had from the questions you've raised. So my take on the first one is, yes, I think there should be, yes, we try to incorporate percussionists now into various house gigs and techno gigs, but then now what we haven't fully discovered yet is how to, the preparation that goes before then, even just on the stage, to make sure that this kind of thing works out. So back to stereo fields. So I think the onus is on whoever is managing the stage. If you know that there's going to be a percussionist, take the time to figure out where the sounds from this percussionist should be in the overall mix that is coming out through the speakers. So there's a soft drum, there's a bit of a harder drum that is being hit at the same time. So you should know where this sound should be coming from. What happens is that you have a percussionist coming right before the DJ, and they only just have a microphone, which is supposed to send out the signal to the speakers. This, I feel, depending on how the volume is mixed, it interferes with the overall sound. That's why sometimes it's overpowering, sometimes you can't hear it. So it's good that folks take the time to figure out how many microphones you're gonna attach to this, and where each sound should be positioned so that you can hear it the way it should be heard. And then the second point would have been on the groove, right? So you're playing percussion, but you feel like it's interfering with the bass. I would say if you listen to the tracks that you would be drumming over, you can, when you're practicing, you can tell like, okay, this is where I can add the groove. Now remember, the thing about sound is that you want everything to be heard in its own space without being interfered by another sound. So you can come up with a groove that does not interfere with the track. So what I mean is, if the kick is going, 4 to the floor, doof, 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 you add your drum grooves in between those beats of the kick, and then it comes up with a different type of vibe. I'm forgetting your second question, and I really want to touch on it because I think I had heard it the first time. Do you mind repeating it? The second question that you had.
Because if I create my, I'm getting now the kick from the text. When I feel it, I feel like I don't need to apply another kick from my side on my set, percussion set. So I'm like, I will play, I will play things like rhythms and spice, soft percussion, just to add up spice, but to assume that kick from the text. But in many occasions, you find that if you just jump from nowhere and come to stage, or you haven't discussed and you just come to stage, you find that you get lost and people are like, wow, is he listening to the real music, or he's just doing his own thing? So that's why I was like emphasizing on do most DJs should, or what you guys like as DJs, what you need to do is, before the show, could it be something like a rerun of the playlist, where I should come in, I should not play, or play the soft rather than mounting the kick?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, I think it's very important because this is a serious show. If you're pairing with a percussionist, it's a different experience you're trying to create. So I would say ideally it's important that you link up, have a jump session, get to build a chemistry, get to know what kind of tracks the DJ wants to play. The DJ also gets to know what kind of sounds are available through the percussionist's equipment. So yes, it's important to meet and discuss. And if that's not possible, I would say the bare minimum is have a chat, and the DJ can let you know, hey, for this performance, these are the kind of tracks I want to play, and send you links, a playlist, whatever it is, so that at the bare minimum, you as a percussionist, you can listen to the tracks and know what kind of vibe is going to be there, and you can also figure out like rhythms that you would think would go well in the show.
Yeah, so on that point as well, I agree. If possible, you definitely should have a jam session with who you're going to be performing with, definitely. And in the event that you don't, I would say that they, at least before, like I said earlier, you should at least not. You should at least have your microphone set up the way that you want it, to not be giving a frequency that is overlapping over what the other person's doing. And then also, for you to be able to keep groove and do your thing during the track, I think for you to then shine, or for you to utilize what you can do and to really push that on, I would say wait for the breaks. I'd say use the breaks, utilize the breaks to shine through. And then as the drop comes in, let the track guide you. During the break, you guide the track. So that's what I'd recommend as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, MAWE and Eric K. Thank you so much. That was lovely. Thank you for the audience for sitting in and coming through. I hope you gathered something from the conversation. Yeah.